Yeah, it's always like, oh, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Well, everyone, we're at our seventh niche conversation today. I'm Jessica DeWitt. I'm one of the editors at the Network in Canadian History and Environment. And today I am joined by Lauren Judge. Do you want to tell us more about yourself?
Yes, I'm a PhD candidate at Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm also a visual artist, and I live and work from Waterloo, Ontario. And my research looks at visual culture primarily, as it relates to cultural geography. So I'm looking at the visual culture that comes out of the Bruce Peninsula
Mm-hmm.
and how that has normalized the dispossession of First Nations people living on the peninsula. So, yeah,
Very pertinent today
yes.
to the discussion. So I invited you here today because last week we published an article by you called "The Group of Seven,"
Hmm.
The Group of Seven's True North, Strong and Free or Visual Colonization. And so we're going to discuss that today. And first of all, I thought maybe you could start by talking about how the Group of Seven portrayed the Canadian North in their paintings.
Right. So, the Group of Seven are known for landscapes, as you see the one above by J.E.H. MacDonald. And these landscapes are primarily, or at least the ones that they're really famous for, are of wilderness, or what we would call wilderness, primarily landscapes that are located in our national and provincial parks. And we call it the North, although a lot of the landscapes that were featured by the Group of Seven were not really considered, or what I would consider North. I mean, I would consider north like James Bay, or, further north like, I don't know, Timmins. But a lot of them were taking trips from to escape their urban areas, which are typically around Toronto, and to escape and to paint places that were accessible by rail. So it's the landscapes are quite beautiful. Everybody loves them. I mean, that's why people have latched on to this as part of their identity. But I ask, is this really our true north? Does this really represent Canada's north, which is really huge and vast?
Mm-hmm.
It, not necessarily. I mean, Lauren Harris's iconic images of things like the icebergs, etc., are obviously what we would term the north, but
Mm-hmm.
most of the Group of Seven were painting further south.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So you kind of touched upon it, but maybe talk about more about how these portrayals of the Canadian North
Mhm.
or Canada in general kind of have helped to shape the Canadian identity.
Sure. So, really, what helped to establish these landscapes as part of our Canadian identity were the institutions that were tasked with shaping this identity in the first place. And that main institution would have been the National Gallery of Canada. And as I showed in my article, 1913 was really a big year. It was the year that the National Gallery was established as independent of other things like the Royal Academy. And Eric Brown, the original director of the National Gallery, was already starting to write about and talk about in the art circles about this need to figure out what is this Canadian, or what is this national identity? How do we determine our own heritage? How do we set ourselves apart from, you know, what would what would normally be the empirical regime in art? What really distinguishes us?
Mm-hmm.
And also around the same time, painters were starting to leave the urban area where they were employed. The Group of Seven were employed mostly in the commercial graphics industry, and they were leaving to find landscapes to paint and to find their own style. And they were at the same time very influenced by a lot of the modernist paintings that they were seeing. So we tend to look at their paintings because reviewers and critics at the time, when they were seeing these paintings in circulation, they were commenting about how they were so different. They were so different from other painters like Homer Watson, who really painted in that sort of Turnerian type style,
Mhm.
or Constable type style almost. Very, very sort of dark, subdued, kind of beeswaxy covered sort of lens to the landscape. Whereas these artists were starting to bring forth these landscapes that had really evident brushwork, a lot of rough brushwork, things that showed the movement and the rhythm in nature. Their portrayal of a windy landscape. You can almost feel the wind that's going through the pine trees that you see. And you can see the lighting and the color work there that just wasn't prevalent in the landscapes that came out of that sort of English style that we brought over with us originally. Um, so I think that, people latched onto that new style thinking that, yes, we found something that's Canadian, it's
Mhm.
distinct. But really, as I touched on in the article, their style is really just using techniques that these artists were influenced by from modern painters. So a couple of them had actually studied in Europe, and a couple of them had toured when the Albright Museum was showing Scandinavian symbolist art, and also there was the sorry, I can't remember the name of the exhibit. It was a very famous exhibit that was touring the northern states at the time. They were influenced by these modern painters that they were seeing that were originally from Europe. So is it distinct? Is it really part of our identity, this new style of painting that the Group of Seven brought forth? That when they really made their mark in 1920, when they had their inaugural exhibition as a group, is it distinct? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it's still just ideas and new knowledge brought over from the empire, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
That's interesting. When I look at it, I kind of think of when I look at this particular painting, I should say, not all
hmm
of the paintings, but this one right here, I like think rugged individualism immediately as
yeah.
someone who has studied the American Canadian West.
hmm
One thing that some people argue that sets Canada apart when you think of the frontier thesis or what have you is that Canada's supposed frontier um, still exists in the north, right?
Right.
So this kind of the wilderness that they're presenting kind of connects to that in my mind.
Yeah.
Um,
I find that the landscapes that they present give us this sense of that they discovered
mhm.
something that was previously uninhabited. But we know that's not true. So,
Yeah, which
like
brings us to
it's
our final question, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And actually,
so you,
I wanted to
yep.
inject an example of that. If you look at Tom Thompson's paintings, now
Mhm.
Tom was not originally part of the Group of Seven. He was sort of, I would argue, one of their inspiring friends, I guess, because he passed away in, I think it was 1917 that he passed away. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, in his paintings, you'll see things. You'll see a lot of birch trees and a lot of jack pines and things like
Mhm.
that, which is actually like known to be second growth species, right? So they tend to shoot up in areas where there's already been logging or there's already been fires, and so it's they're examples or markers, natural markers of somebody already existing in that landscape. So it's those nature's given us those clues in those landscapes that they've painted to show that this is not a completely new newly discovered landscape. Somebody's been here before, others have been here before. So yeah.
Really interesting example. I love when we can intersperse ecology into the humanities.
Yeah.
That's why I love environmental history. So, and so in your article, you talk about visual colonization and you
hmm
describe the group of seven's work as something that's an example of that. So I wonder if you could talk about how you define that term yourself
Hmm.
and how you see the group fitting into this
Right.
umbrella.
Right. Visual culture is absolutely a tool of colonization. So if you look at every piece of visual art as being infused with discursive power, right? You have to see that in paintings, in things like souvenir postcards, and even maps and such. But visual colonization comes from that. Okay, so if you see one of Varley's paintings, that squally weather painting, you'll interpret it as, okay, this is very rugged, this is very wild, lots of natural resources, lots of natural wealth, and then these institutions have latched onto these landscapes like his to say, yes, this is the kind of identity that we want to be associated with. This is the kind of these are the symbols, these are the visual markers that we want to be associated with. This is our heritage. We tamed this land, but this is a marker to show what we accomplished, what we've conquered.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I interpret it as visual colonization. Also, the people responsible for determining that these images are part of our identity are the very institutions that colonized Canada. They were empowered by the British Empire. And even though Eric Brown, the original director of the National Gallery, says that basically that he's looking for this new national identity, and looking to be set apart from the empire, essentially. But you're not, because you're utilizing all the same institutions, all run by the same white men who are in order to do this. So if you need to be, if you want to if you're really setting yourself out to be new, those institutions that are setting that trend or that fashion or or enacting that mandate to be distinct, those institutions should be distinct, but they weren't. It was the same old people, just a few new written mandates into the legislature, but it's still, it's still law.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's how I interpreted it. And I'm sorry if it's not very eloquent. I'm better when I'm left to my own writing.
No, I found your argument very persuasive in the article, and I like that you point out that because um, Canadians adopted this kind of art as kind of part of their identity, that meant that we ignored or erased Indigenous perspectives of
Yes.
this land. And
Exactly, and that's part of why it is colonization, is because we adopted this, and we didn't, and the people, like, there were people that put this in front of the Canadian public. It was highly curated,
yeah,
right? But what was not put beside it were all of the other voices. There's a whole pluriverse of what constitutes this land and this country and this Canada that were not consulted when they were putting together this exhibition that was supposed to define Canadian identity. So those voices that are silenced, there's power there. It's just we have to unearth that, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for this piece that you wrote. It was really enlightening and well received, and I think very
Thanks.
important addition. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. This is
Thanks
great.
for having me. This was
Yeah,
this was interesting. It's my first experience like this, so
yeah. I'm slowly getting more comfortable with it, but with the first couple times I was like, ooh, this is
yeah.
awkward. But I'm getting better. So,
Well,
well,
thank you for the work that you do. It's awesome. So
oh, thank you.
yeah.
Well, take care.
Bye.
Bye.